Today I'm sharing my top 4 ideas that helped me progress on my non-dual journey. These ideas will help any confusion or feelings of being lost, and hopefully help you improve your understanding of non-duality and how to practice it effectively. So without further ado, here are 4 practical tips and ideas for practicing non-duality and shifting your experience. The first key idea is that conceptual understanding is essential to access non-duality. There seems to be this apprehension to give clear instructions and advice. Religious systems and structures can make it really difficult to reach or access teachings on non-duality, and more modern teachings can be presented with some sorts of mysticism and ambiguity that makes it really difficult to know what the practice actually is. If you want to practice anything, you need to know very clearly how to practice it. I believe we would all be in a more empowered position for progress if we could speak about non-duality more openly and freely. Although non-duality is beyond concepts and also beyond words, words still are a very useful tool to help us move closer to insight and ultimately enlightenment, because you really just need to know what you're practicing to practice it. And so, the easiest and most obvious way to approach non-duality is by conceptual understanding, which then will make practice so much easier. The second point that has helped me is that if you're not experiencing non-duality, you are lost in thought. You are lost in subtle concepts that you may or may not be aware of about your being. This means that the experience of duality is the result and experience when you do not have the mindfulness to notice very subtle thinking. This is useful to know because otherwise you might spend your entire lifetime never making significant progress towards the recognition of no self. Usually, when we first start out, we try to access non-duality through thoughts, because this is how we're used to moving through, being in, and relating to the world. We're not even aware that thought is our main relationship to being. But if you can understand that this is probably what's happening, and then begin to discern this, you'll start to realize how much of your practice is actually just sitting with different kinds of thought and thinkings. And with this awareness, you can, of course, stop being lost in these thoughts and concepts and begin letting go into non-conceptual presence. When I first started to practice, I would wonder why I wasn't recognizing non-duality, wondering what I had to do or what I had to figure out. But this was the problem. The problem was that I was only thinking, and so I wasn't noticing these present and convincing thoughts of confusion that were clouding my ability to be with the natural and aware non-dual nature of mind. And please know that it's not a mystical way to get there. Experienced teachers will stress this point, that non-duality is no secret, rather it's quite ordinary. You don't have to understand something about the universe, do prostrations, or pray. You just have to be more aware, develop mindfulness. And that's incredibly practical and, most importantly, actually achievable. The great insight from this point is that if you then sit down and try to access non-duality with this new knowing, and your experience continues to be conceptual, dull, or confusing, you know that this is because you haven't developed enough mindfulness to be aware of thoughts as they arise. To sustain non-duality, you have to be mindful to the point where you notice every thought you have the moment it arises. This might seem impossible, but it's very important because it isn't impossible, and it is a prerequisite for non-duality, because otherwise you would be lost in thought and therefore lost in duality. The problem for someone who doesn't feel confident in accessing non-duality is the persisting question of what to do. So one quick way to help you make progress is to really simply point out this what not to do, especially because it eliminates so much mistaken practice. You're almost only left with how to do it, which makes practicing non-duality much clearer. The third point is that consciousness is already non-dual. This is a phrase that made my non-duality practice so much clearer. My assumption when I first began to practice was that there was something to do. But what this idea points out is that consciousness is already non-dual. So there's nothing I need to do. Non-duality is just a question of whether you're noticing it or not. And And noticing isn't effortful. It's an inherent quality of consciousness. Consciousness is aware. So if you can align to that, non-duality will be obvious. But what if your experience doesn't feel non-dual? Well, you go back to the first point. It's because you're lost in thought. Sounds easy, huh? But practicing is the only way to get there. The fact that we already have it is important for us to grasp. We don't have to bring in something extraneous. We don't even have to develop anything. We already have everything. We just need to uncover it. It's always been there. It's absolutely perfect, just as it is. But we don't recognize it. It's as if we're standing in the sunshine and then we go inside, draw the shutters and say that it's dark. But the sun is shining the whole time. And the last non-dual pointer is that if when you're practicing the non-dual nature doesn't feel obvious, if it feels mundane or if there's no clear recognition, just try to let that be for a moment longer, because awareness can develop without your intervention when you sustain it like this. When non-duality doesn't seem obvious or easy, the usual habit for people is to try and solve this with conceptual thinking by trying to figure out what's wrong. But since non-duality is non-dual, approaching this with effort and thinking is not going to work. Instead, see if you can let the mundane feelings or confusion be, and let them be for a moment longer than you might otherwise think. Awareness will develop naturally and you can move closer to non-duality. One of my favorite teachers, Tsoknyi Rinpoche, always emphasizes the importance of this dropping or letting go. And in that short moment of letting go, there is freedom, but our tendency to tense up, question or understand can be so strong that we don't notice this short moment of non-duality. That is what is keeping us stuck in confusion. So the lesson here is that we just need to have a bit more courage to experiment with how to let go completely and how to let go for more than one moment, knowing that we will find non-duality amongst complete non-grasping. Worry about if you did it later. Don't do that whilst you're practicing. Otherwise, your practice will just be filled with those worries. Those worries strangle the opportunity for experience. And you need more experience to feel confident in your realizations. And there are even more nuances you can add into this picture, and there are more specific instructions that might be necessary to improve your practice. But in some regard, these are the course points for realizing non-duality, both sitting down and off the cushion in your day-to-day life. If you found this video useful and you'd like to support the creation of more content like this, you can like, comment, and subscribe. May we all come to know wonderful ways of being.